Yeah, hello senseis! The 4.5 anniversary is currently underway in Blue Archive Global as we're enjoying the beach with our Trinity wives in the new event Summer Skies Promise. And this week, the long-awaited 4.5 Fest units Swimsuit Mika and Swimsuit Nagisa are finally making their debut in Global. Plus Dress Hina is also returning as the rerun Red Up Anniversary banner alongside them. In this video, I'll mainly be reviewing Swimsuit Nagisa, whereas Swimsuit Mika has been reviewed in a separate video. Meanwhile, I've also already reviewed Dress Hina when she first released. I'll leave the links to these videos in the description. Anyways, without further ado, here is a short review of Swimsuit Nagisa. Fellas, it is finally time to talk about the leader of Trinity's Phileas faction and the Tea Party's host who's been dragged by Mika to the beach to de-stress. It's Mika's childhood friend who is slaying in her new swimsuit. It's Swimsuit Nagisa. Listen, I love Seiya and Mika, but personally, I think Nagisa is the hottest among them, and her new swimsuit just solidifies my opinion. Cause good golly gumdrops, she looks so freaking hot. For one, that black monokini very much activates my monkey brain neurons, and it is the best part of her new O. It accentuates her previously well-hidden big calcium cannons, the alluring figure, as well as her long sexy legs that I need on my face. I wanna drink a tea that's been brewed from the sweat of her feet. Not to mention that white cardigan, those bangles on her hand, the book she's reading, the pair of white angelic wings, and her sunglasses all make her look even cooler. She definitely exudes classy, mature mommy vibes who's at the beach with her kids and her husband. Plus that serious expression on her face in her portrait is just chef's kiss. If evil, why hot? Finally, her new ash blonde high ponytail hairstyle with the bangs really tickles my pickle, cause y'all know I love ponytails. And even in this new alt, she's still sitting on a damn chair like she's freaking Virgil. All in all, I'm in love with Nagisa's swimsuit alt design. Plus I actually do like Nagi too, cause of her mature personality, her willingness to learn from her mistakes as she tries to not be paranoid. I personally relate to that. Her desire to be friends with Hifumi, I'm aware the community exaggerates it a lot, but I don't really mind that. And the fact that she is voiced by the GOAT herself, Sayori Hayami. Speaking of, the Tea Party reminds me a bit of Oregairu's Service Club. I mean, you have Nagisa as Yukinon since both of them are voiced by Hayamin and are the leaders, Mika as Yahalos cause they are extroverted and cheerful, Seiya as Iroha as they are short sly foxes. Okay, I know Iroha technically isn't a club member, but she visits them so often she might as well be, and as Senseis as 8-man, trying to find the real thing. Or if you want, as Hiratsuka Sensei, I suppose, if you're a hot single 30-year-old woman who smokes. Maybe that's why I like the Tea Party a lot. They feel weirdly nostalgic to the characters from Oregairu, which so happens to be one of my favorite enemies slash aliens of all time. And I do wonder who represents the other characters like Zain Mokuza, Totsuka, Shiro Meguri Senpai, Hayato, Komachi, and Beskel Kawasaki. By the way, Season 2's OP is the best, don't at me. So, what kind of student is she? Well, Swimsuit Nagisa is a limited Fest special Sonic supporter whose terrain moves are as follows: S combat power in urban terrains, A combat power in field, and D combat power indoors. And she uses shoes, bag, and watch for her equipment. Now, how good is Swimsuit Nagisa? Well, she is mainly a very potent crit damage hyper buffer who is the first and only student so far to have the unique ability of granting one ally the cost overload buff. And this is thanks to her cheap 3 cost EX skill, which at max level allows her to apply this buff as well as a 78.6% crit damage buff onto one student for a decent 26 seconds. Let's talk about how this cost overload buff works. Essentially, when she applies this buff onto one striker student, the particular unit can go into Nagisa's debt, as she allows them to borrow up to an additional 5 costs in excess of the currently held cost to activate their EX skill early. Meaning, if their EX costs more than the amount you have in your cost meter, they can borrow that extra 5 costs to instantly proc it, which will put your cost meter in the negatives up to a max of -5, preventing you from using any EX skills, and you'll need to wait for it to recover before being able to borrow more costs slash activate any EXs. So for example, in this footage, Mika wants to use her 6 cost EX, but there's not enough cost in your cost meter, so apply Swimsuit Nagisa's cost overload buff onto her and she'll be able to launch it even if you don't have 6 costs yet, though this will make the cost meter go into debt by being negative, and it depends on when you use the EX, like if you triggered it when the meter was only at 3, then it will become -3, though Mika needs to wait for the meter to at least be 1 cost before being being able to use her EX early, cause remember, you can only borrow up to 5 costs. However, keep in mind that you're not actually increasing your total cost meter to 15. You're simply borrowing a few additional costs and you need to compensate for it by waiting for the negative cost to recover. Plus, only the unit who has this buff can go into debt. It does not affect the whole team. Not only that, you can also identify which student has this buff by the lightning effects on their EX card. Plus, that unit can technically consume this extra 5 costs an unlimited amount of times throughout the buff's duration. Aside from that, more than one unit can also have Swimsuit Nagisa's cost overload buff at a time. For instance, individually granting it to 2 students on the team. And you can activate the first student's EX skill by borrowing the cost, then you can continue to borrow costs to trigger the second student's EX skill even while in negative costs. Though you might need to wait a bit depending on how much the second EX costs. Cause remember, -5 depth is the max you can go up to. With this being an interesting strat, cause even though you will stay in the negatives for a longer period, it can be useful in certain situations/battles where you need to quickly finish off the enemy and can't wait for the cost to fully recover. One last very important detail about Swimsuit Nagisa's cost overload buff is that it can only activate if your team has the maximum possible number of students and none of them have been defeated. So you need to ensure your team is fully filled with all 6 students in regular content, 10 in fire restriction, while also preventing them from dying by bringing in a dedicated/passive healer or shielder if needed. TLDR, Swimsuit Nagisa's cost overload buff is very useful and unique. It is the main reason why she is a fast unit and it can be utilized in many situations, like allowing you to perform certain rotations that you previously couldn't without her and helping your students activate their EXs much quicker, being particularly helpful for those with powerful expensive EXs, especially if for instance you need to deal tons of damage to one enemy in their short damage window. And how you specifically use this buff depends on the students in your team. Remember, you need the maximum amount of units, your rotations, and the content you're tackling. Other than that, Swimsuit Nagisa's EX's crit damage buff is extremely potent too, with hers being the second highest in the game just behind Dress Aru's. And it is even more powerful and lasts almost twice as long as Akko's crit damage buff. Though this does not mean she has power crab her or any other single target crit damage buffer, as you'll still be utilizing them in separate teams like on harder difficulty content. Not to mention, you can also utilize the other single target crit damage hyper buffers over Swimsuit Nagisa depending on the situation/team you're using. And there are definitely pros and cons to using either one of them. Moving on from her EX, the rest of Swimsuit Nagi's kit is pretty simple. With a level 10 basic, she decreases one enemy's crit damage res by 38.2% for a good 27 seconds while dealing minor damage to them with its 376% multiplier every 35 seconds. Her crit damage res debuff is quite useful mainly against enemies with high crit damage res, as she provides around a slight 5 to 10% damage increase, though the damage this skill deals isn't anything worth mentioning since it's very little plus unimportant as she is a supporter. Next, her enhanced skill increases her crit damage, which only directly boosts the power of her basic skill's damage by a bit, but her enhanced skill plus at UE40 is more effective as it grants her an additional 19% buff retention, upping the duration of her EX's buffs from 26 seconds to around 30/31 seconds, with these few extra seconds being useful for slightly longer damage rotations. However, you don't exactly need this level unless you're trying to min-max your rotations or speedrunning/trying for a higher clear score, and 3 to 4 star Swimsuit Nagi is usually more than sufficient. Meanwhile, her sub-skill increases your entire team's crit damage by 17.3% at max level skill, making her a better crit damage hyper buffer, as combined with her EX's crit damage buff allows her to boost your DPS unit's crit damage by nearly 100% at a whopping 95.9%, letting them hit way harder and exponentially improving their firepower. Lastly, at UE50, her urban combat power is upgraded from S to SS, while UE60 increases her max cost by 0.5, though these two levels aren't needed at all since the former only affects her personal damage, whereas the latter, in my opinion, isn't worth it cause the benefits are little and you need 200 of her elefs, which is a huge investment. All in all, Swimsuit Nagisa is an extremely powerful crit damage hyper buffer who has the added unique ability of applying the cost overload buff onto one ally, allowing them to essentially go into her debt by borrowing up to an extra 5 costs to activate their EX skill early. Plus, she can also periodically apply a decent crit res debuff onto one enemy. So, where can Swimsuit Nagisa be used in? Well, as a game's first cost overload supporter, she is very flexible and can be/has been brought into a ton of content, being used in a multitude of team comps as she synergizes well with quite a number of students, units, since she makes certain rotations much easier to execute. Specifically, her best partner is her childhood friend Swimsuit Mika, who greatly benefits from the cost overload buff cause it basically makes it easier for her to launch her expensive consecutive EXs when she's in the rapid fire stance, with her nukes becoming more and more exorbitant the more times she uses it. Hence, Swimsuit Nagisa lets a fellow Tea Party member go into her dead and borrow 5 costs to activate her 4 and 6 cost EXs earlier. Like, she can do so even if the cost meter is only at 1 cost, allowing her to rapidly blast her huge shots multiple times throughout her rapid fire stance's duration, which coincidentally lasts for almost the same amount of time as Nagi's cost overload buff. Plus, you can also use a cost cutting unit to further help with this, as you'll be able to activate her EX even quicker while not going too much into the negatives. Not only that, Swimsuit Nagi's crit damage buff can not only help with greatly increasing Swimsuit Mika's damage output, but also due to the latter's guaranteed crit, the former's lack of any crit rate buffs is not a concern, making her a better partner for her than Akko. And this applies to regular Mika and Nozomi too, who also have guaranteed crits and high cost EXs. There are other DPS units who will work effectively with her too, like Dress Hina, Hinata, Amtoshino DPS, etc., all of whom have expensive EXs. Plus, even for those with cheaper EXs slash auto attackers who won't need to keep using their EX, or for rotations that don't need a lot of cost, you can definitely still use Swimsuit Nagisa with them for her crit damage buff. So you'll be pairing her with these units not for her cost overload buff, but to simply significantly boost their firepower. Not to mention, you can also sometimes use it on healers if you need to quickly fulfill the battle's mechanics, or to save your student from dying, which may be especially needed on harder difficulty content, cause the cost overload buff does not work even if one student in the team retreats. With all that said, Swimsuit Nagisa's biggest weakness is arguably her lack of a cost recovery sub, meaning it's preferable to partner her with a special hyper buffer who has the sub skill, cause it can also help the negative costs to recover faster. But you can still of course use her with other special hyper buffers who don't have this sub. Many senseis have. For example, Ryo for her duplication ability, or Nyuefuka for her cost reduction. Though remember, Nyuefuka's EX can also grant a crit damage buff, so you should use Swimsuit Nagi's EX first after Nyuefuka's so that your student gets Nagi's stronger crit damage buff instead. In terms of specific content, like I mentioned, Swimsuit Nagisa can and has seen a lot of use in a whole bunch of content, thanks to her flexibility as a powerful and unique special hyper buffer. For example, she can be used in early game content for newer senseis who are struggling in whatever stage. Most joy in firing drills too, though remember her cost overload buff doesn't work in team setups with only a few students, and most importantly, she is mainly brought into raids, which is where her cost overload and crit damage buffs shine, since these can help in defeating the raid boss more smoothly by allowing for easier rotation executions slash powerful damage amps, potentially earning you a higher score. Since her release, she has been used in literally almost every single raid on nearly every difficulty. For example, she has been brought into the Bina Grand Assault on every colored stage to buff units like Swimsuit Mika, Dress Hina, and Maid Aris. She's Grand Assault, where her cost overload is useful in phase 2 during his groggy phase when he opens up, as she can help your DPS units quickly deal massive damage to him during this very short damage window. Shirokuro Grand Assault to up the crit damage of units like Shiroko Terra, Wakamo, Dress Hina, and Nozomi. Hieronymus mainly for the Swimsuit Mika teams, plus for the very recent Kaiten Grand Assault. There's also total assaults like HOD, which will be coming to global next week. Imperodzilla for Amtoshino DPS to rapidly deal damage to the Peruro minions before they get sucked back up, and Yesod, where she is good in phase 1 to not only help Swimsuit Mika destroy the lanterns ASAP and damage him during his brief stun window, but she can also slightly decrease his exorbitant crit damage rest on Torment and above with a basic. Finally, while there are some raids that haven't returned yet after her release, like Gauss, Hovercraft, Kurokage, and Gregorius, she can still be used in most of them, except for Gebura, where special DPS units are needed instead as they deal increased damage, as well as special DPS focused Gregorius teams. Plus, for Final Restriction, while she can be useful against all 3 bosses, her pick rate isn't as high, especially for Set and Tiff, since there are other better suited special units for these bosses. So, should you pull for Swimsuit Nagisa? Well, in my opinion, gameplay wise, 100% yes you should, cause she is one of the game's most powerful hyper buffers who can be used to help you clear a whole ton of content, especially the harder difficulty stuff. Not just that, she is also a limited fest unit who will only return during the next anniversary, where you have a chance of spooking her. Plus, there's also double drop rate for 3-star units, excluding the on-banner character. So I personally feel that regardless if you want Swimsuit Nagisa or not, you should pull on fest banners, cause it is an excellent opportunity to get get her as well as the other 3-star students that you don't have, including other older anniversary units. Not to mention, you'll also likely be getting more Eligma thanks to the increased drop rate for 3-star units, which you can use to buy more of her elapsed if you want to get her to UE40. With that being said, who should you prioritize between the 3 banner characters? Well, gameplay wise, I personally think you should go for Swimsuit Nagisa first, as she is more flexible and is useful in most content, whereas Swimsuit Mika and Dress Hina are extremely powerful in purple and red content respectively. So I'd recommend getting Swimsuit Nagisa first, then decide who you want/need between the other 2 if you don't have Dress Hina yet. Though remember, you can still spook either of them on the other 2 fast banners. Regardless, you should absolutely try to own all 3 of them because they are powerful fast units, and if you're a Nagi bro who wants to lick her feet just like Kim Yong-ha, or you wanna enjoy spending time with her at the beach in her aesthetic L2D, then go ahead and pull for her. And that's all for this review. Again, the Swimsuit Mika review has been uploaded in a separate video, link is in the pinned comment. Please go check it out if you haven't, it really helps me out. Anyways, thanks for watching, let me know who you're pulling for if you are, good luck with your pulls, and I'll see y'all in the next one.